Monday's WTO ruling is being seen as a win, particularly for Western nations. Now, China, for its part, says it's going to respect that decision, and analysts say it could actually lead to something bigger, the unraveling of Beijing's restrictions on exports of those rare earths that you mentioned. Now, there is a bit of backstory to this, starting back in 2009, and that was when the U.S., the European Union, as well as Mexico filed a joint complaint against China, basically accusing Beijing of imposing dozens of restrictions on its mineral exports. Now, some raised the prices of those minerals that China sells abroad. Others imposed export quotas. Now, 9 industrial minerals came under those Chinese restrictions. They included things like bauxite and zinc. Those are minerals used in everyday items from steel to batteries to ceramic ware. Now, China filed an appeal against the complaint, and it was that decision yesterday that upheld the original WTO ruling. So what does this all mean? It means China can't legally hoard its raw materials right now, which is pretty much what it's been doing for much of the past decade. Since China joined the WTO in 2001, it's actually held on to those raw materials by taking advantage of an old legal exception. That has allowed it to slap tariffs or quotas on exports, so long as the aim was to, 1, protect the environment, or 2, to conserve a rare natural resource. But with China unable to do that anymore, the playing field is now level for trade in those minerals.
This is a fascinating development, isn't it, as far as level playing fields, as you point out there. Now, just on the rare earth side of the story, because we have talked a lot about this in the past, about how China is such a big producer of these rare earths and how difficult it is to get them if you're not Chinese. Will it mean that Beijing is now likely to loosen controls on the export of those minerals, or do you think they'll just sort of ignore it?
Sure. Well, right now, as it stands, the U.S. and the EU haven't filed any complaints in the WTO against China over these rare earths, but not yet at least. And it's clear that's where the focus is headed to right now. China currently produces more than 90% of the world's rare earths, and it's actually used this near monopoly as both a political and an economic tool. In 2010, for example, it stopped rare earth exports over to its neighbor Japan over a little territorial dispute, and that made the price of those minerals soar. And right after Monday's ruling, EU Trade Commissioner Karl de Gucht, well, he came out and he kept the pressure up on Beijing, and he was saying this: China must now comply swiftly. He says, I expect China to bring its overall export regime, including for rare earths, in line with WTO rules. Now, it's important to note that even though these rare earths are called rare, though, they're actually not all that rare, and it's just that production is limited and getting them out of the ground can be difficult. For example, last year, a huge deposit of rare earths was found off the coast of Hawaii, but guess what? It was several kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean. And that deposit, of course, would take years, if not decades, to get to, and that's why focus is now on China's rare earths restrictions.